My name is Sean, and this is Joe. We're from the Sheriff's Office. Pleasure to be here today.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Joe walked around, I think he passed out some goodies to you. He gave you a file of life, which we give out free of charge through the Sheriff's Office. Very important, critical thing to have. The fire department's here today. They're going to talk about doing CPR. That's a fantastic thing to have on your refrigerator. Keep close to the bedroom somewhere. Keep your medications on there. You pass medical history. That way, God forbid, if you ever have to go on the ambulance, they have all that information right there for you. Helps deliver better care for you. Helps them to deliver care faster for you, depending on what your medical situation is. So that's a great thing to have. Pass out a pen for you as well. You can always use a pen around the house, right? It's a good thing to have. And that brochure that he passed out talks about all the programs we offer through our Community Outreach Division. So in there you'll see things about public safety presentations that we do, like you're going to hear today, and also our different services. Our K-9 unit that we have here. We have someone in the room here whose son works for the Sheriff's Office as a K-9 officer for us. Details what they do, as long as our Scared Straight programs, our Files of Life, free 911 cell phones, house numbering programs. It's all in there. And on the back is our contact information. So if you ever need our assistance, we're always here to help. We do a lot more than just arrest people. So we always like to make sure that we're involved in the community. We're a county-based law enforcement agency, so we cover a lot of territory. But we're always here to help. And if we don't have an answer for you, we'll definitely find somebody that does. We'll put you in touch with them. So I think everyone's here, so let's get right into it. I always like to ask when I'm giving this particular presentation, is there anyone in the audience that takes medication? By a show of hands, right? That usually gets a good laugh. Yeah. It's unbelievable. It seems like every year there's a new medication on the market, there's a new pill to take that corrects this problem, and the dosages go up and up and up and up. And it seems like if you do take medication, you know that your dosages is always changing, the doctor finds something else, they want to give you another type of pill to take, and you're supposed to keep track of all this stuff, right? And you're supposed to take the blue pill on Monday, the green pill on Wednesday, the yellow pill on Friday, cut the pill in half one day, take a full tablet the next day. It's a lot to keep track of. And what I want to tell you is that we have a little bit of a situation right now. You've probably read about it in the newspaper, not just here in Worcester County, but across the country, with heroin, with opiates and opiates, drug abuse. And a lot of that is actually, believe it or not, tied into the type of medication that is readily available, that doctors prescribe, that you may have been prescribed yourself for different ailments, for different medical issues. And what we're going to talk about today is how that is related, why we have seen such an explosion when it comes to unintentional opioid-related deaths, why heroin has crept into small towns, wealthy communities. You know, heroin started out as just a back alley, kind of seedy section of the city drug. No one did heroin. You never saw heroin overdoses in small communities. Then all of a sudden, starting about 2011, 2012, all across the state, the numbers start to explode. You're not just saying, seen an increase by 5%, 10%. We're talking about 100% increase, 200% increases in all different communities. So the presentation today is going to talk about why it is so important to protect the medication that you have in your homes, how to properly dispose of them, get rid of that unused medication or excess medication that you may have, and by doing that, how that is going to help law enforcement fight the war on heroin and the war on opiate medication, okay? So I'm just going to get right into it. As you can see here, we're going to talk about the opioid crisis and how to protect your medication. Opioid versus an opiate. You may say to yourself, why does it matter? What's the difference? They're probably the same thing. As you can see on the screen here, an opiate originates naturally from the poppy plant. So by using the poppy plant derivative of it, you can get certain medications, certain drugs. Tell me if you've heard of these things. Heroin? Yeah. Opium? Yeah. Morphine? Yeah. Codeine? Yeah. These all originate naturally from the poppy plant. That's how they're created. So you can already start to see off the first bullet point why medication like codeine, if somebody habitually abuses it, why they may turn to heroin, because it's derived the same way. Now opioids, you hear the opioid crisis. Opioids are synthetically manufactured, so they're either made in a legitimate lab or a clandestine drug lab. Tell me if you've heard of these things. Demerol, oxycodone, fentanyl, Percocet. These are things that you've heard about before. You may actually have been prescribed. Has anyone ever been prescribed these type of pain medications before? Fantastic. So yeah, so not fantastic that you had to use them because you obviously, these are pretty some serious pain medications. Now, I always like to ask if you've ever taken one of these drugs, how did you react to it? Did it ever make you feel sick?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people say, oh, can't even, morphine, yeah, it makes you feel sick. Didn't make you feel sick, and sometimes it could be because you've been used to taking all sorts of various medications. No, you just, yeah, so.
I think there was so much pain that when they finally give you something, you don't care what it does.
Right, you don't care, right? It feels the relief is there, and that's important, certainly. Certainly, and we're going to get into that because the medical community started to attack pain a little bit differently. And that's why we saw, especially when it comes to oxycodone, that was kind of supposed to be the wonder drug. Oxycontin, you may have heard of it as well. That's the medical name for it. Oxycontin, yeah. That was supposed to be the wonder drug, and I'll get into that very, very soon. But just to not to get too technical with it, as you can see here, what these drugs do, whether it be heroin or codeine or Percocet, it depresses the central nervous system. So by doing that, as you can see, it interferes with the nerve signal transmissions. That's how it controls your pain. Doesn't fix your broken back. It just interferes with those nerve signals, so your broken back doesn't hurt anymore. It's a good thing, absolutely. By controlling pain, they can treat you differently, they can treat you better, they can focus on the areas that are wrong and hopefully try to correct them. And you'll hear it thrown around, an analgesic, that's just a pain reliever. So you can see, whether it be an opiate or an opioid, how it originates is a little bit different, but they do the same exact thing in your body once you start taking them. So that moves on to the next thing. Why does it matter? As you can see there, production. So if you're a drug dealer or you're a drug lord and you want to get this stuff into the United States, opioids are a lot easier because you can synthetically manufacture them in a drug lab rather than trying to smuggle all that stuff across the border. So as it says, production, it's chemical synthesis. It manipulates the reactions for a desired result. It's easier to smuggle. Now, you may see, you're reading the newspaper, you see it in the news all the time, they'll talk about a bad batch of heroin that's going around. Bad batch meaning because it's killing people. What happens is, drug dealers they're entrepreneurs, they're very industrious. They are just like running a major corporation. They want to control their costs. They want to make it cheaper to produce their drug, sell it at the same value or greater for the lowest cost. So when it comes to dosages, you'll take something like fentanyl. Ever heard of a fentanyl patch? They used to give it to people that were on hospice. They had cancer. They wanted to give something that they could put on you, just like a nicotine patch, that does a slow release dosage into your system that'll help dull your pains. Sort of end-of-life care. Fentanyl is something that you can't just get over the counter. It has to be prescribed to you. You have to, you have to have a certain purpose for it. When they synthetically make illegal fentanyl, it is actually 80 to 100 times more potent than morphine. So if you ever had morphine, you know how powerful of a drug that is. You can see there, 25 to 40 times more potent than heroin itself, and 80 to 200 times greater than prescription fentanyl. Prescription fentanyl is stuff they're giving to cancer patients that are end of life, 200 times greater than that. So when you start to see a bad batch go around, the problem is, by looking at it, you can't tell the difference. If it's just pure heroin, or if it's laced with illegal fentanyl. So when you mix those two things together, a heroin addict injects themselves with a dosage that he or she thinks this is the right dosage for me. So we're going to achieve my ultimate high. The problem is when that's introduced into the body, it has serious unintended consequences. It depresses their central nervous system so much that they would literally stop breathing, or they're only breathing 1 to 2 times a minute. Your body can't survive that way. It depresses your cardiac output to a rate that your body literally can't survive with. So they either overdose or they just die. Their body can't bounce back from it. As you can see, it looks similar. It's easy to confuse, easy to combine drug products. So with this happening, you say to yourself, well, how did we get to this point? I'm going to go back a little bit. Talk about how the medical community started to address pain and pain management. In the 90s, a prescription drug company created OxyContin. OxyContin was a wonder drug in the sense that before that, pain management, it was very limited. If you ever watch any of the war movies, if you watch Saving Private Ryan, the field medics had morphine sticks. They would just jam it into the side of the leg, and that would give instant relief. Instant, it would take a minute or two, but it would kick in. It would also wear off very fast. It only lasts about 30 minutes. They created OxyContin, and what they said is, if we can create a drug that's going to last for 5, 6, 7 hours to control pain, that'll be a lot better. The problem is when you have a slow-release drug, you have to pack it with a lot of product for it to last 5, 6, 7 hours. So they didn't really understand how addictive this drug was going to be. Now remember, OxyContin is an opioid, which is also related to heroin, as an opiate. So what happened was, people started to become addicted. Their body started to crave that analgesic because there was so much drug product packed into the pill. So now you have somebody that, they get in a car accident, they have a bad back, their doctor prescribes to them to do pain management. Once they run out of the prescription, they say, oh, I need more of it. I need more of that drug. So they either go to the doctor says, no, you're all set, your back's healed, you don't need any of that stuff. So they turn to the street. No, on the street, if you have 60 milligrams of OxyContin, that can go for $200, $300 street value, a pill. So that means you're on the street now seeking pills, you're going to run out of money pretty fast. Heroin goes for about $6 on the street. And as we learned, mimics the same properties. So eventually you have people that run out of money, they can't seek pills anymore, they're addicted to how they feel when they take these drugs, and they turn to heroin. So that's why we all of a sudden saw an explosion. That was part of the reason why we saw an explosion onto the drug scene with heroin in small communities, in affluent communities, in big cities. Exploded, and that's why. So how does it get here? Have you guys heard of El Chapo? He's been in the news.
Oh, yeah.
Joaquin Guzman. He's the head of the Sinaloa drug cartel in Mexico. Joaquin cut his teeth under a guy with the name of Pablo Escobar. You may have heard of him too, right? In the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Pablo was in charge of getting all the cocaine into the country from Colombia and through Guatemala. So people like Guzman were lieutenants, and they started to learn how to smuggle drugs across the border and get it into the country. As you can see here, what they used to do is they would put it in boats and run it up through the Caribbean and get it into Florida, and get it into Mississippi, the border that are on the Gulf. Well, the Navy and the Coast Guard, they got pretty attuned to this. They started to shoot the boats down. They would intercept them before they could get to the border. So they had to change their tactics a little bit. They went to the air, and they started smuggling it across the border. Fast forward now, Pablo gets killed, he gets arrested. Joaquin takes over. He takes over from a guy, El Padrino in Mexico. His Sinaloa drug cartel, they try to change their tactics a little bit. They say, why don't we keep the operation based here in Mexico? But the guys at the top, we got to keep them out of the United States, because if we get arrested, they're going to put us behind bars. We'll never get out. In Mexico, if we make enough money, we can start paying judges off, police officers off, border agents off. We're safer in Mexico. So what they did is they enlisted the help of people like the Latin Kings. Ever heard of these guys? The Bloods, the Crips, MS-13. These are gangs that are already in the United States. Before, if you had drug product, you would have to move it around yourself. You would have to find safe houses for your drugs to sit in before you could distribute it on the street. You had to have people on the payroll that you knew that were affiliated with your organization to make sure they didn't steal your drugs, they didn't sell it to the wrong people, or they weren't taking a cut, stealing money from the bottom. They paid off these gangs in the United States to basically do their dirty work for them. That's how they distributed it. They set up distribution hubs. All the drugs and the heroin that we really get here on the East Coast comes from the Chicago distribution hub for El Chapo. They also have a distribution hub in Los Angeles that handles everything pretty much west of the Mississippi. And as you can see here, it's estimated that the Sinaloa and Guzman himself made $3 billion a year from the main distribution site in Chicago alone. So $3 billion a year. It's a big, big business. And you can see smuggling across the border, places like the Big Bend Panhandle in Texas, it's up 129%. El Paso, Texas, and New Mexico up 138%. And through Tucson up 58%. So they had these distribution lanes set in when it was with cocaine, and they just transferred it into heroin. Now cocaine, obviously, they still make money off of that, but they're making big bucks off of heroin right now, and that's how it gets into the country. And you can see here on the map, it's kind of far away, but the Sinaloa is orange, so that shows you how much of the area they control here in the United States. They pretty much have the entire eastern seaboard, the entire western seaboard, and you can see around Chicago everything else here in the middle. It's unbelievable. So they do big business, and that's why when they caught Guzman the first time, he was in Mexico's top prison. I mean, it is notoriously known for being a place that no one gets out of, and he got out like that. Now he's back in there, and they're moving him around. They're trying to extradite him to the United States because the DEA, our federal law enforcement agencies, have such a case against him that if he was ever extradited here, hopefully he would be put away for the rest of his life. He would never see the light of day again. Heroin use, as we talked about, what's unbelievable about this and why they found a causal link to medication that was out there, you can see it doesn't matter your gender, your age, your socioeconomic background, your religion, it doesn't matter. Across every single demographic, usage is up, and it's up in big numbers. 50% change, 109% change, 114% change. This is huge. That's why it really is an epidemic when it broke onto the scene. And as you can see here, it's part of a larger problem. Heroin use and substance abuse problems are linked together. People who are addicted to alcohol are 2 times more likely to try heroin. 3 times more likely if they're addicted to marijuana. If they use cocaine, 15 times percent. In opioid painkillers, 40 times. Which isn't surprising because we know how similar they are to one another. So here, now we have an opioid crisis. We figure they finally start saying to yourself, we have to figure out what this is. And they find that causal link between prescription medications certainly contributing to the factor of having this crisis. As you can see here, the rate of unintentional opioid-related overdose deaths, which included deaths related to heroin, reached levels in 2013 previously unseen in Massachusetts. The rate of 14.5 deaths per 100,000 residents for 2013 was the highest ever for unintentional overdoses and represents a 273% increase from the rate of 5.3 deaths per 100,000 in 2000. So in Worcester County, you can see in 2000 there were 59 related deaths. By 2013, it was up to 120. And by 2014, it was at 113. Now you say to yourself, well, that's 113 is less than 120. I have asterisks here. And the reason I do that, it's only classified as an unintentional overdose once it's certified by the state medical examiner's office. They have to go in and they have to basically do an autopsy. They have to figure out exactly what was the cause of death. That takes a while, and they're pretty backlogged. So unfortunately, this number is going to go up, and this number is going to go up substantially. That's why there's asterisks there. But you can already see within 13 years how much it was increasing. Now for the calendar year of 2015 in Q2, so we're only talking about a 3-month time period. Total population of Worcester County is 809,106. The total number of Schedule II prescriptions. So Schedule II is a classification that's given by the DEA. It means that it's highly addictive. Any type of medication that gets that. Schedule II is highly regulated by the government because they know that if it gets out on the street, it sells for a lot of money, and they know what it's going to do to people. The total number of Schedule II prescriptions was 113,352. This is just in Worcester County alone for a 3-month quarter. Schedule II solid dosage units, 7,312,385. In total number of people with that prescription, 51,630. In Worcester County alone. It's a lot of drugs out there. A lot of prescription drugs out there. And we know how dangerous it is if someone becomes addicted to it, how easily they can transfer into using heroin. So as you can see, opioid-related deaths by year. In Brookfield, tiny little Brookfield, they had 0 in 2012. By 2014, they were up to 2. And that asterisk is there because it's going to go up. Worcester had 24 in 2012. 2 years later, they're up to 43. And that number is definitely going to go up by a lot. So you say to yourself, well, how are people getting their hands on this? This graph basically just breaks down, this is from the National Survey on Drug Use. It was done through the White House. Source of pain relievers by non-medical users. You can see here, when it comes to free from a friend or a relative, 55%, bought from a friend or relative, 10%, and took from a friend or relative, that's 5%. So 70% of the people obtained it from a friend or a relative, whether they bought it or stole it. That's how they got their hands on it. So that's why it's vitally important to protect your medication. And how do you protect it? We're going to go into that right now. Before I do that, I just want to quickly touch upon an overdose, how to recognize it. If you're not used to it, if you've never experienced before, it's a very scary thing. There are some telltale signs. Some of these signs will mimic other medical conditions, but if you ever see somebody with blue skin tinge, especially on their lips or their fingertips, That could be a sign because they're not breathing enough, they're not circulating enough oxygen through their body. That's what's going to happen there. Their face is going to be very pale. You may not be able to find a pulse, but it's going to be either very, very slow or it's going to be erratic. The heart's not going to be doing its job properly. They could be throwing up, they could be passing out, choking, snoring, gurgling sounds, breathing very slow. You want to make sure that if you see any of these signs, activate the 911 system immediately. Get the fire department coming, get the police coming, okay? You want to make sure that the scene is safe as well. If we're talking about people that are injecting drugs into their body, be careful about what's lying around the floor. There could be needles, there could be other drug paraphernalia that's around. You don't want to accidentally step on that, touch it. You could injure yourself very badly. And I want to touch upon Narcan. Have you heard about Narcan? Narcan was one of the things that they tried to use to combat the opioid crisis. And there's no doubt about it, Narcan definitely saves lives. I'm also a firefighter and EMT, so I've used Narcan. There's a couple of ways that we administer it. We have an atomizer, we can shoot it up somebody's nose, or we can push it intravenously, like put it right into their bloodstream. Narcan is a wonderful thing. It definitely saves lives. The one thing I want to say about Narcan, though, is it doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't cure somebody's drug addiction. It's a temporary solution to a more permanent problem. And sometimes, depending on what somebody has ingested, what they've taken into their body, you give them 4, 5, 6 rounds of Narcan before they come to. Or they may not even come to. Narcan basically blocks the uptake of that opioid in the system. It blocks the receptors. It basically isolates it. So what it'll do is somebody will be on the verge of dying, and within a couple of minutes they'll sit up and they'll look at you and they'll say, "What happened?" They don't know what's going on. And sometimes, usually they'll try to fight you because they're upset you just took away their buzz. And you have to explain to them, you were about to die and now you're not. You're alive again. But yes, these people need treatment facilities. They need to be coached. They need to be educated on substance abuse problems because Narcan, if they just go down the road of saying, "Oh, if I overdose, just give me the Narcan," so they may not come back from it because Narcan, just like those old morphine sticks, wears off. It's only going to last for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes the most. So they need to make sure that they are monitored in a hospital situation because they could, once the Narcan wears out, they could go right back into an overdose state again, depending on how much drugs they have in their system. And Narcan is also, if they do something called a speedball, which is when you mix heroin with cocaine, they do opposite things. Heroin is going to depress your system, cocaine is going to jack it up through the roof. The Narcan is not going to do anything for the cocaine. It only works for opioids specifically. So it is a very good thing. It's just important that people know about the limitations of Narcan. Doesn't always work, won't always fix you. It definitely saves lives, but I just want to make sure that people are aware of it because they talk about home use Narcan now. It's pretty much everywhere. It's getting to the point now where you may be able to get it over the counter at your drugstore to use it in the home. And it definitely is good. I just want to make sure that people realize it doesn't solve the addiction problem. It just solves the overdose problem. So, protecting your medication, vitally important. As you can see here, you want to approach securing your prescriptions the same way you would other valuables in your home, like jewelry or cash. I know it sounds crazy, but as we talked about, the street value of these drugs is just like having hard cash. Sometimes people will steal the drugs, they won't even take them, they just want to sell them on the street because they know it's worth more money. So you want to make sure that you lock it up. If you have a medicine cabinet with a lock on it, that's a good spot. But you have to remember, that wall of privacy that used to exist isn't there anymore. People will not think twice about going into your bathroom and looking in your medicine cabinet to see what's in there. Walking into your bedroom, looking at your pills. And as I said, they may have a drug abuse issue, or they may just be looking to sell the stuff. So you want to make sure that this stuff is locked up in a secure desk drawer that locks, in a medicine cabinet that locks, in a secure place. So if someone does try to find it, they're not going to be easily accessible to get their hands on those drugs. Secure them in a place you only know about. Now that's important. I also will caution, it's medication, so don't hide it so well that when you need to take the medication, you can't find it. That defeats the problem, right? I mean, that defeats the original intent of having the medication in the house. So you don't want to forget where you put it, but if you have a safe place that you can lock it up and only you know about it, that way if somebody comes into the house, they won't know where to look. If possible, keep all medicines, both prescription and over-the-counter, in a locked cabinet only you can access. People may confuse them. They may just be drug seekers trying to find your pills. Make sure that they're secure so they don't take it. Now, disposal of medication. You want to safely dispose of expired or unused prescription medication. It's a critical step. There's a few ways you can do that. Before they used to tell you just flush it down the toilet, dump it down the sink. Well, you can't do that anymore. There were a lot of happy fish swimming around out there in our waterways. Drugs were getting into the groundwater. It was affecting the natural habitat. So you can't do that anymore. Some medication will say right on the prescription pill bottle, it'll tell you okay to flush or okay to put down the sink. That stuff you can discard, but that way. But as a general rule, you don't want to dump it down the sink anymore. The best way to do it is put it right in the trash. And if you're going to put it in your trash can, mix it with some undesirable substance like kitty litter or ground coffee beans, grinds, whatever it may be. Mix it up there so even if it's in the trash and someone looks into your trash, they're not going to see it. Now I say it serves two purposes. One, it hides it a little bit better, but also if you have young kids that are in the house and they happen to look into the trash, they may think it's candy because medication can be different colors. It can kind of look like candy, whatever it may be, you know, M&Ms or whatever it is. So if it's mixed up in that undesirable substance, you're going to be less likely to reach in there and grab it and try to eat it. Take an inventory of your medicine while you're home alone. This is a great thing to do because that way it checks for you if you have a regimen that you're on by your doctor and you know you're supposed to take this pill this many times a week or whatever. You keep track of it. Also, if someone is taking your medication, you're going to be able to recognize it immediately because you're going to say, this doesn't add up. I had 30 pills yesterday. Now I'm down to 15. I only took 2 of them. The math doesn't add up. So that way you can police yourself to make sure that that medication isn't being taken by somebody. Not to say that all your friends, relatives, home health aides are criminals and drug seekers. That's not the case. The problem is, as we saw with the graph, the way people are getting their hands on these prescription medications, 70% got it from friends or family. So you have to keep track of this stuff. You have to make sure that you keep your thumb on it because someone may be taking it and it's probably the person that you least suspect. And it's still getting in their hands, getting on the street. It's contributing to an epidemic. Now, unless the packaging says otherwise, as we said, don't put it down the toilet. There are certain areas, police stations, fire stations, places that are manned 24/7 that actually have drug drop-off locations. And every now and then, certain towns will do a drug take-back day once or twice a year, where you can take all your unused medication and bring it out. Up here, I usually try to change it. I just didn't have time. The Milford Police Station, not too far from here. It's a little bit of a hike. Has a drug drop-off box inside the police station. So you can take your medication down there and drop it off. Closer to your area, Grafton Police have one. It's secured 24 hours a day. And the Upton Police also have one in their police station. So you can take your medication down there and give it to them, and they'll dispose of it for you. Now, different police departments and different drug take-back places have different rules. So what I would encourage you, rather than just walking in with a plastic bag with pills in it, take it down with the pill container bottle so they know exactly what it is. Sometimes the police departments will just want to make a notation on what drugs they're taking in. Other places like Worcester, they don't care. You can bring in a trash bag full of pills, the cops will take it, and they'll dispose of it. They just want to get the stuff off the street. But some departments do ask that you bring it in the pill bottle. Once they take the inventory, best thing to do is just destroy the little wrap that's wrapped around the pill bottle that has all your personal information on there. Get rid of that, because that has a lot of your personal information on it. May have a prescription number on there that someone may try to use to up the prescription. Just want to destroy that, because you don't need it any longer. What we're doing on a law enforcement side of it, a couple task forces have been initiated. One was done by District Attorney Early for Worcester County, and we've had partners that go on to that. Both local law enforcement agencies like your local police, the Sheriff's Department, the state police, and also federal authorities like the FBI, the DEA, and most importantly, the medical community is now on board. So you have something called the PMP, which it started in Vermont. Vermont was way ahead of the times when it came to this stuff. They were kind of the model for New England. Maine then got on board. Massachusetts is on board now. The worst by far is New Hampshire. They're having a really, really difficult time controlling this heroin problem. But PMP is great. It's a monitoring program that doctors' offices, that hospitals and their offices are going to be enrolled in. That way, if there was an outbreak of opioid unintentional related deaths, they can look into the figures and they can say, this doctor's office is prescribing this amount of opioid medication. We need to look into it. Is someone stealing it? Is somebody selling it? Hopefully that can curb and we can track how the pills are circulated on the streets and in our communities. Also, hospitals, doctors' offices have stepped up. They've talked to the legislators that are involved in these task forces to change legislation for things like Narcan. If someone is administered Narcan, they can't just sign a refusal and say, I don't want to go to the hospital. They're going to have to, hopefully the legislation's changing a little bit. They have to go to the hospital. They have to be monitored. That way you can control a little bit where they can say, oh, I just got the Narcan, I'm good to go. Once you guys leave, I'm going to do some more drugs. The governor's office has also initiated a task force to try to secure more funding for rehab facilities, to get more treatment plans, treatment programs, more beds for people to go into. Because as we're recognizing, this is a very difficult monkey to shake off somebody's back. And in the past, as we know with the sheriff's office, with the jail and house of correction, if someone had a drug issue, you would just put them in there, shut the door, throw away the key, that was it, whatever. Once they got out of jail, the problem was they reverted back into the old lifestyle with the old people they used to hang around with, and they were just as addicted before as they were when they came into the jail. So they're realizing that if everyone starts to work together, we get people into treatment programs, hopefully that will curb their addiction issue. And through public safety initiatives like this one and what we do, we go into the schools, we talk to the kids. We used to go to the high schools, now we go to the middle schools as well. Start them younger. Educate them on this subject. Hopefully they know that if they ever come across it, they're not going to go down the wrong path and they'll stay on the straight and narrow. So it really takes a community effort and to team up to try to curb the addiction. And as you know now, by protecting your medication, protecting your pills, that goes a long way in taking a step towards isolating this opioid problem, keeping the pills off the street, which then in turn contribute to the heroin problem. And that's it. That information is right on the back of the brochures that we passed out. So if you have any questions, you can certainly call our offices. We'd be happy to help you. Does anybody have a question on something I didn't touch upon or something I talked about that you'd like some more information on? No. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. It's a scary topic, but I think now that we have task forces in place, the great work that your local fire departments do, that your local police departments do, I think statistically we're going to start to see the numbers starting to come down. They got ahead of us there for a little bit. We didn't understand exactly why there was such an explosion of these unintentional opioid-related deaths. But once we dug into the numbers, we figured it out, we realized it's a lot more than just busting in doors and arresting people. We have to really take it as a community event and a task force, get different partners on board to isolate the problem, to shut it down, and then hopefully keep people off these drugs in the future. So I thank you all. Yes, ma'am?
Wouldn't the people that are on drugs know that Narcan is out there, so that they don't care, they would just take more? They don't care?
That was
they
one
know
of,
it'll bring them back?
Correct, yeah. That was one of the reasons why the legislation had to change about how it was administered. Because you were seeing people, I've experienced it personally, you give somebody Narcan, you take them to the hospital, almost before the ambulance is back in service, they're signing themselves out of the hospital, walking out the door, gone. And they realize that you can't operate that way. It's not a safe way to operate. People need to be educated on the topic. The problem you're seeing too, as I talked about with the drug dealers lacing their product with illegal fentanyl, things like that. Believe it or not, if a product, they mark their product just like Nike marks their shoes. They have brand logos that they put on the bags when they sell this heroin. So what happens is, on the street, if somebody dies from a certain brand of heroin, the street value goes up. Because what happens is you have people that are so addictive, if they're getting junk product, it's not getting them the desired effect that they're looking for. But if they know that there's a brand out there and someone just died from it, they say, oh, that's good stuff. That's got a lot of drugs in there. So they seek that out. So that's one of the reasons that the drug dealers, they'll just lace it to make it cheaper so they can increase their profit margins, but they also know if they put a bad batch out there and people start dying from it, the street value is going to go up. So that's why things like Narcan, as I was saying, people giving multiple rounds, 4, 5, 6 rounds of Narcan to try to bring people back, it's because the drug dealers, for a dual purpose, will lace the product. And that's why it affects the user tremendously. Yeah. But absolutely, if they know it's out there and it's just one of those things that they say, oh, it can bring me back. That's why I say, It doesn't always work, doesn't always cure the problem, and it certainly doesn't fix the addiction problem. You know, it's just there, it's a medical intervention that hopefully will bring them back from the brink.
Thank you, Sean, so much. That was very informative.
Thank you all very much.
In a very small window, 5-6 minutes, right, Cheryl? Because think about it, if you're not breathing, it depresses your system. If you're not breathing for 5 or 6 minutes, you're going to have brain damage, and you're probably going to die anyway. So the bottom line is, it works, but you have to get there very quickly. And the EMS or the police have to get there very quickly. The person has to be found very quickly for us to be able to administer them. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about CPR today, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Paramedic Avelina is going to show you how to use your life pack, which is your defibrillator. In recent years, what CPR is, we have to really be able to distinguish when a person's not breathing or when their heart has stopped. Okay, and one of the biggest signs is a person might have had chest pain, or they may just be doing something and collapse, and then all of a sudden, you call the ambulance. So the question is, how do we rectify that, or what do we do about it? Well, obviously, if you see someone collapse, the first thing you want to do is what? Think about that.
Check their breathing.
Right, but even before that, because we want to call 911. If someone collapses, we want to get that the emergency medical services activated, so we can get police and fire to the scene as quickly as possible. So calling 911. Obviously, with CPR, a lot of times what you want to do is you want to shake the person. You have to try to arouse them. Are you all right? Are you okay? If they don't respond, okay, 911. Maybe the person's a narcoleptic. They just fall asleep a lot. But these are things that you run across. So it's very important, first of all, that if you see someone collapse, you check to see if they respond to you. Okay? Are they responding? If they don't respond, obviously, immediately you want to call 911. Okay? Now the next thing is, it used to be we would assess airway, breathing, circulation. We always used to say ABCs. Well, that's changed in the past few years, in the past 4 years or so. Now they call it CAB, compressions, airway, breathing. So first of all, what they actually want you to check a carotid pulse and then look and scan the whole body and see if the person's breathing, but they want to make sure, does that person have a pulse? They want to get to that very quickly. You want to identify using the carotid artery in the neck to see if that person has a pulse. If they have a pulse, what do we need to do? Well, we're going to check their breathing and their airway to see and make sure everything's okay. If they have a pulse, we might just give rescue breaths or something like that. We have a BVM. It's a bag valve mask resuscitator that we can just give them a breath every 5 seconds. But the bottom line is, the American Heart Association wants us to be able to identify quickly whether that person has a pulse or not. Because what they're doing now is something that's called hands-only CPR. So people were very reluctant. They don't want to get diseases and things like that and give mouth-to-mouth, which is probably it's a very good thing. However, when a person collapses, even if their heart stops beating, there's still oxygen within the system. So they still have oxygen in their blood supply. So what they want us to do immediately, once we know they don't have a pulse, is they want us to do compressions. That's the C, compressions. And then airway breathing. But right now, we're just more or less teaching you people how to do compressions, because if you're doing the compressions, you're actually manipulating the heart and you're squeezing it between the breastbone and the spine, and you're actually causing the heart to beat every time you push down. So if I'm doing that, then what's happening? I'm pumping that blood around so that the oxygen can get to the cells and sustain life or keep the person alive for a while. So right now, the American Heart Association is not teaching you to do rescue breathing at all for a person in cardiac arrest. What they want you to do is right along the nipple line. They want you to go right over the sternum, and you have to sort of rock your weight up and down. They want you to go, they say 2.4 inches, okay? That's the new standard, 2.4. I don't have a ruler out, and I'm not measuring 2.4. So basically, if you go a third of the depth of the chest, or 2.5 inches, you're gonna be good. And they want you to do it hard and fast. It used to be the minimum ratio they wanted compressions to be at least 100 per minute. Now they're saying 120. They want you to even go faster than that. Move that oxygen and that blood around 100 to 120 times a minute, leaning towards the 120, because they want to make sure that they're getting more compressions, so they're able to move that oxygen that's still in the system around. And they're just teaching you compressions, CPR only. And then when the paramedics arrive, we'll take over and we'll do the rest as far as establishing the airway and things like that. So for you folks, if someone who were to collapse here, or if you're at the grocery store, first thing you're gonna do, are you all right, are you okay? They don't respond, call 911, you assign someone to call 911, you're gonna check for a pulse in the neck, carotid artery. 5 to 10 seconds you wanna check for a pulse. No pulse, you're gonna start doing compressions just like I just showed you. You wanna go at a rate of about 120 a minute, about 2 inches, 2.5 inches deep. Does that make sense? Now, the next thing is, if there's one of these available, which we were able to obtain for you folks a couple of years ago, it's called an AED, an automated external defibrillator. And Joe's gonna talk a little bit about that.
Hello, everybody. So this defibrillator here actually belongs to the senior center. Does anyone know where it actually belongs? Where in the building? All right. Everyone take a look over in that corner. See the orange first aid kit? That open space on the shelf is where you'll find this defibrillator. So if something happens here, maybe at night, and the staff isn't here, you guys might need to use this. So just that's the location. It's always going to be there. So the way this works, it might look a little complicated. Very, very, very easy to use. So as someone's doing CPR, someone else is going to want to go and get this machine. Before that, I know we already talked about this. Make sure you call 911, get us coming on the way. So this little yellow tab here opens the machine up. Sitting on here, I just put them in here for my ease. So sitting on here are going to be these are pads, defibrillator pads. These open up by grabbing this red handle and just pulling backwards. Now, when you open the pads up, they're going to look like this. And they go in certain locations. There's diagrams on each pad that points right where it wants it to go. So this pad here is going to go on the right shoulder, just like this here. And this pad here is going to go, this is called the axillary line, but it's just the side of the chest here is where this pad's going to go. And they're just like stickers. They just peel off, just like this. There's a little gel on here, some conductive material. And this goes right here. So while you're putting these on, someone can still be doing CPR. So then, with this machine, you have an on-off button. So if you press this button, this top's going to flip open. It's going to start to talk to you.
Call for help now.
So it tells you to call for help if you hadn't.
Remove clothing from chest.
Tells you to remove any clothing from the chest, which you probably already done that once you put these pads on. Now, it's going to this should remind you to plug in the pads. It may not.
Pull red handle to
Perfect.
open bag.
So it tells you to pull the red handle, but you guys might be
Peel
faster
each
than
pad
this.
off blue plastic. And apply pads to exposed chest.
Now it's going to tell you to plug this in.
Remove clothing from chest.
Or it may not. All right, so it doesn't tell you to plug. Everyone's different. Even life packs, they're all different. So this one doesn't tell you to plug it in. There's a little diagram that shows you exactly how to plug this
Pull
in.
red handle
And you'll
to
see
open bag.
it's going to go in just like this into here.
Peel each pad off blue plastic.
And then it's going to tell you to stand away
And
from the
apply
patient.
pads to exposed
This-
chest.
This right now doesn't know that we have the pads on because there's no patient.
So normally we have a trainer one, and what this one will do, this one, you have to get to a certain point before it gives you further instructions.
Yeah.
And we don't want to get it to
We don't want to test it. So what's going to happen is, you don't have to follow these instructions if you remember how to do it, but these are great instructions. So the big thing is, keep doing CPR, expose the chest, put these pads on, and again, if you forget, there's a diagram, so you really can't mess it up. You're going to want to turn the machine on,
Remove
plug the
clothing
pads in
from
here.
chest.
And then once they're plugged in and they're on a person, it's going to know if they need to be shocked. You can't mess it up at all. It's going to tell you, stand away from the patient. So take your hands off, stand back, don't touch the machine, don't touch the patient. And if they determine they need to be shocked, it's gonna tell you to shock. So here, it's gonna be a little loud.
Remove clothing
This
from
red
chest.
button will light up, and it's gonna tell you to press the shock button. The big thing to remember is, you don't wanna be touching the patient, none of you standing by wanna touch the patient, because that shock could transfer to you. So just stand away to the side, tell everyone you're shocking, and press the shock button. Then the machine's gonna tell you to continue doing CPR. I know people might be afraid of this, I think it's a very complicated machine, but it's not. Did anyone drive here?
Yes.
If you can drive, you can use this. I mean, it's so easy, so. No, I'm telling you, you really can.
That one came from the elementary school.
This one did?
That's where
Okay.
the chief got it from. It's pretty simple.
Very, very simple.
And one thing you want to remember, people get nervous because it's electricity, but it will not allow you to shock somebody if they have a pulse. So you can't hurt that, you know? It will not allow you to shock somebody. However, if you're touching somebody that they're shocking, now you can get shocked. But it will not allow you to shock somebody if they have a pulse. And it will not allow you to shock somebody if they have a rhythm that cannot be converted. You know what I'm saying? It will tell you if a person's too far gone, because it won't let you
This
shock.
is smarter than all of us, this machine. It really is. Any questions on either CPR? Yes?
Are they all like that?
They're all very similar. Some might have different connections or different instructions, but just about every single defibrillator has pads you plug in, and then you press a button to turn it on and to shock them. They're almost 99% of them are all the same. Yes?
If someone already has a pacemaker or a defibrillator,
Yeah.
would that still be used?
Yes, so theirs might not be functioning, so maybe they're stopped working, and that's why their heart stopped. So yes, still put this on. This will sense if theirs is working. This will either tell you don't shock them or do shock them. So if it says go ahead, you're fine to go ahead and shock them. It won't affect their current pacemaker defibrillator.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? All right.
Make sure you're not standing in water when you shock.
Oh, yes. Yes. That does happen. With the rain this morning, someone could go down in the parking lot, so.
Does anybody want to try?
Yeah, does anyone want to try CPR on the mannequin? No? All right. It's very easy. Nobody? All right.
That's a crash course on CPR.
Yep.
But now at least everybody knows that defibrillator has actually been here for 4 years. And I know Sandy and I have talked about it before, but now it's just a reminder, just like where the fire extinguishers are. That's very important, especially if the Sunshine Club has something at night and there's no staff here.
So the CPR machines, the AEDs, they're in all the schools, they're here, they're at the town hall, most of the public buildings have them. A lot of places, airports, golf courses, they have the defibrillators, a lot of them. If you have a big business, a huge business, where you employ a lot of people, a lot of them will have the defibrillators. The police have them in their cruisers, we have them on the ambulances, we also have the EKG monitors, so if you have paramedics on the ambulance, you won't see the defibrillator will come out, you see them come out with a heart monitor. Any questions for Mr. Avellino?
We're good? Thank you, guys.
You all right?
Mercy Ann is here, so if anybody wants their blood sugar taken before lunch, now would be a good time. Otherwise, she'll be here doing blood pressure checks throughout the morning, so she will. Lamita.